Hello boys and welcome back to the channel. So in today's video I wanted to talk about the good, the bad and the ugly in regards to Battlefield 5 and see what lessons we can learn for the development of Battlefield 6. I think this game gets a lot of hate, but in reality, having played a lot over the past few months, there are some positives to take away from this game. Before we get into it though, if you do enjoy the video, please do subscribe to the channel. We do everything Battlefield over here: Battlefield strategy guides, Battlefield 6 leaks and rumors, Battlefield gameplay. If you can think Battlefield, we practically do it. So if you're interested in Battlefield, hit that subscribe button. But anyway, jumping into the first issue with Battlefield 5 is the class setups. I think one of the big problems is the unbalanced nature in the way the classes play out in the game. The health regeneration system, which requires bandages to regenerate to full health, makes the medic class in Battlefield 5 very OP. Now compare that to the assault class, for example, where the projectiles are just really lackluster. It can take 5 or 6 Panzerfaust shots plus dynamite plus anti-tank grenades to tackle even a single tank as an assault player, which just makes utility when you run assault feel very underwhelming. I think there needs to be a complete rework of the classes for Battlefield 6, moving back to a more original formula that we've seen in prior titles, giving the assault class or the engineer class in some of the titles a little bit more of a buff, and maybe moving back to a health regeneration system where all classes have the ability to regen to full health, albeit that the medic can maybe regenerate quicker as we've seen in the past. Next up is game modes, and I think Battlefield 5 does pretty well when it comes to game modes. Frontlines is actually my favorite game mode across all Battlefield games. It gives a really nice balance between attacking and defending for both sides, and then finishes up for the attacking team with the rush objectives that we all know and love. Breakthrough also works pretty well on most maps, although some maps are better than others, but that's more to do with map balancing and design, which we'll discuss a little bit later. I think something that does need work from Battlefield 5 for Battlefield 6 is Grand Operations. Grand Operations in Battlefield 5 works on a 3-map contingency, where if you win the first map, you gain maybe more tickets or a faster respawn rate of vehicles. The problem is this really doesn't have an impact that much so that it affects the outcome of the game. Grand Operations, it all depends on the last map who wins or loses, and the reinforcements really just don't make that much of an impact. Again, I think for Battlefield 6 there needs to be some kind of reimagination of Grand Operations, as it stands now in Battlefield 5, it just doesn't really flow that well. After that we have Team Balancer, and this is obviously a controversial point because no one wants skill-based matchmaking like we've seen in Warzone implemented into Battlefield. Now I'm not talking about SBMM here, but I would like to see some kind of basic team balancing features. I think we could start with a team switcher, which we've seen in all prior Battlefields. I don't know why they took it out of Battlefield 5, but they need to bring that back as a starting point for Battlefield 6. And then on top of that, I would like to see some kind of auto balance feature where maybe you could take into account the last game's performances and maybe switch squads around, which has actually happened in previous Battlefields as well. I think I just find with Battlefield 5 there's too many occasions where I'm either getting completely steamrolled or completely steamrolling, and there's not that many competitive games. They're not impossible to get, but it's rare in nature. Moreover, I'm going to chuck this into Team Balancer, but there needs to be some kind of better system in which lobbies fill and become more populated more quickly, as in a lot of cases in Battlefield 5, I do find that I am in a lobby for maybe 2 or 3 matches and then find that the lobby becomes very sparse in nature. Now this may be due to the low player numbers in the game, and I am willing to concede that, but again, I just think there needs to be some work in this area. Next up we have anti-cheat, and this is pretty self-explanatory. I'm not going to talk about this too much as I play on console and it's not a massive issue for me, but having played Warzone, the amount of backlash the developers have seen over there for not having a robust anti-cheat system is incredible, and rightfully so. They should be getting this criticism. It just ruins the game for so many gamers on PC primarily. So they need to have a robust anti-cheat system, and it is pretty prevalent cheating in Battlefield 5 on PC, as I've been told. After that, we have weapon customization. In Battlefield 5, they moved to a specialization system, and I think it's understandable to a certain extent because they are limited by the time period. There's probably not so many, attachments they can actually put on to weapons in Battlefield 5 being set in a World War II period. But if we are going to a modern setting, which is looking highly likely for Battlefield 6, I really want to see more BF4 vibes here when it comes to weapon customization. I want more options, more features, just more when it comes to weapon customization in the game. Not only do I want to see more BF4 vibes, but I want it to see upgraded from there. Warzone actually does this pretty well, or Modern Warfare in general. There's a lot of different features people put on their weapons, and I think with Battlefield 6, we need to be seeing something along those lines. Communication is the next point then, and I think for many of us, Battlefield is quintessentially a very team-oriented game, which is ironic because when it comes to communication in Battlefield 5, it is pretty lackluster. There isn't any kind of advanced pinging system, and they remove live spotting, which makes it very hard to coordinate with your team in Battlefield 5. If you look at Apex Legends, this is a great model to go off. You have so many different pings that you can utilize to give information to your team. I also think for Battlefield 6, there needs to be more advanced voice comms across your team. If we're going to a point where there's 132 players or 100 players or whatever it will be, we need more advanced voice comms. But from leaks and rumors we've seen, it does seem they seem to be working on some kind of unit system where a number of squads will be part of a unit and there'll be a unit leader, and squad leaders will be able to coordinate between each other through voice comms. So it does look like they're working on that for Battlefield 6, but I just want to reiterate the game does need some improvements when it comes to communication. Next up, we have movement mechanics, and this is something that was implemented into Battlefield 5. And in my opinion is a must keep. It makes the game move at much more of a faster pace. It also allows you to increase the skill differential between players that are engaging in one-on-one gunfights. Some people don't like the movement mechanics in Battlefield 5 as they feel like the engagements are more like Call of Duty. And I have to concede it does make the engagements feel a little bit more COD-like. But I do think the faster pace that comes with the movement mechanics and the increase in skill differential is overall a good thing. The spawn system then in Battlefield 5. This is probably one of the things that is my biggest pet peeve, or at least up there. It needs a massive overhaul. Nobody wants to be sitting in the spawn menu, waiting to spawn on a squad member, being told they can spawn on a squad member, zoom into that squad member, and then be denied the spawn. It's just not an enjoyable experience, and I understand it's from a fairness perspective. They don't want people spawning in on their squad mates when they get engaged, but at the end of the day, I think it's the better of two evils. We had that system where you could basically spawn on your squad mates at any point in Battlefield 4, and it just worked better. Yes, there were occasions where you were shooting at an enemy and someone would just pop out of thin air and it would be frustrating if you died to them. But I think what's more frustrating is sitting in the spawn menu for 30, 40, 50 seconds, trying to get on your teammate, them dying, or even worse, as I said, you just zooming in and being denied that spawn point. It's just the better of two evils. So I think they need to work on the spawn system. But not only is it a problem spawning on your squad mates, but spawning on objectives in Battlefield 5, you might as well spawn back in spawn. It just spawns you so far away sometimes from the objective areas. I've had times where I've chosen to spawn on one objective on breakthrough, and it's actually put me closer to the other objective. It just needs to be honest and transparent about where you're actually going to spawn. So I think for Battlefield 6, yes, a massive overhaul for the spawn system, as it just isn't fun in Battlefield 5. Map design then. Well, I think map design is complicated in Battlefield 5, as there are some maps that I really enjoy, like Narvik, which may be controversial, or Mercury, or Mauritius. And you may notice a lot of these maps aren't so vehicle focused. And the problem is with the vehicle focused maps in Battlefield 5 is they made them so sparse. I'm talking about Al Sudan, Panzerstorm, Hamada. These are really not popular maps, as there's just nothing going on in them for infantry players. They may be fun for people in vehicles, but they certainly aren't for infantry. Battlefield 6 needs to learn from this if they are going to make more vehicle focused maps and larger maps, and it's almost an inevitability that they are going to make larger maps with larger player bases on a single map. They need to make sure they're not filling these maps with wide open spaces of nothing. They need to take the time to make sure both infantry players and vehicle players can have a good time on the larger maps, as the larger maps in Battlefield 5 just are very underwhelming. And I think there's also an issue that will be unique to Battlefield 6 in the sense that the leaks and rumors we've seen is they're talking about total destruction, where everything will be able to be leveled to the ground. Now, the problem with this, although it does sound exciting as a first concept, is when you have everything being destructible, you could end up in a situation where you get to an end of a game And again, there is nothing for infantry to fight over. There's no cover. Again, it becomes a barren wasteland. So I think when it comes to designing the maps, DICE really need to think about the topography of the map, how quickly in a standard match do buildings actually get destroyed, and whether this has an impact on how fun it is to be an infantry player. So next up we have Battle Royale, and simply this needs more development time. Again, the map of Halvoy is just a poor map, and it suffers from many of the same problems that some of the maps do in the multiplayer. It's just filled with wide open spaces. In addition, they just ported multiplayer weapons over into Firestorm, whilst also adding armor plates, giving infantry players an extra 300 health at times, which just made all the weapons feel very underwhelming and terrible in all honesty. So I think to summarize with the Battle Royale, which they're almost certainly going to do again with Battlefield 6, as I think it's just going to be such a cash grab for them. They need to spend more time on it. They need to personalize the weapons for a Battle Royale, much like Warzone does. Warzone weapons have very different damage outputs to their multiplayer counterparts, and this is something they need to do if they are going to implement a Battle Royale. In regards to Battlefield 6, we also need to see more content drops, and this again is pretty self-explanatory. From recollection, when it came to Battlefield 5, we didn't really get any real content till 6 months into the game, and that just gets boring after a while playing the first 8 maps for 6 months. The live service model also needs to bring more imagination. We need battle passes, more skins, more interesting skins and items. The live service model in Battlefield 5 is, again, lackluster. It doesn't have a battle pass. The skins, although in recent months have been improved, when it first came out, it just wasn't that great. So they need to put more imagination and thought into the live service model. In terms of time to kill and damage output, this is something they changed a lot in Battlefield 5, which obviously wasn't great. You do not want to be changing the fundamentals of something like damage output and TTK once the game has launched. But I think where the time to kill is now in terms of Battlefield 5, which again may be a controversial opinion, is pretty good. I don't want to go back to the BF3 days of time to kill, as that is exceptionally quick and it's pretty hard for beginners to pick up. I'd rather see time to kill like BF4 or BF5 or somewhere in the middle of the two games. The problem with BF3 is it feels like hardcore a lot of the time, and hardcore has its place, but I don't think it should be mandatory for all players to play hardcore. But that leads nicely on to the next point, is hardcore needs to be implemented into Battlefield 6 from day one. The fact that Battlefield 5 didn't implement hardcore until community games came out in 2020 is a joke, really. It excluded so many players that buy Battlefield games for that hardcore experience. Now, I'm not one that enjoys hardcore, but I know there is an avid hardcore fan base out there, and not to cater to their needs is ridiculous. And even with the implementation of community games, there was no official servers for hardcore, and that was problematic. But that moves nicely onto the next point, which is community games. Community games had a lot of good features and customizable options for the servers, but the problem with community games is you have to be active in your server for it to be running, and nobody wants to be sitting in the server for half an hour, waiting for it to fill up with no guarantee of it filling up. So for Battlefield 6, we do kind of need to see a return to rental server program. Whether that's free of charge or they charge people to rent servers, I don't know. But essentially what needs to happen is servers made by the community need to be live all the time, as otherwise they just never pick up steam. Next up, the vehicle meta, and I talked about my pet peeves when it comes to the spawning system. I think the vehicle meta in Battlefield 5 might be my biggest pet peeve. We've talked about this a lot, but vehicles in Battlefield 5 just don't work. They're very campy in nature due to the need to regen health and ammo at the ammo stations. This means drivers are just reluctant to push much past these ammo stations, which really isn't fun for infantry players that are being sniped at by tanks or trying to play the objective, and their tank drivers simply aren't playing the objectives. When we get to Battlefield 6, there needs to be a return to full regeneration and unlimited ammo for vehicles, although maybe not the most realistic way to portray tanks, which is I think where they were going with this tank meta in Battlefield 5. It just, in terms of a gameplay standpoint, makes so much more sense to implement unlimited ammo and full regen for tanks, albeit they can have longer reload times. So finally then, weapon balance. Battlefield 5 is good in the sense that there are a lot of viable weapons. meaning there isn't really a meta and there's lots of variety in the game. The problem is many of those great guns exist solely in the medic class, which kind of links back to the balancing point that we discussed at the beginning of this video. In support, all of the MMGs are terrible. Those are the guns that require a bipod over the LMGs. The LMGs are viable. In assault, you do have some S tier weapons like the STG and the Sturmgewehrs, but there also are a lot of shockers. And in fairness, recon is pretty good in Battlefield 5 in terms of balancing. For Battlefield 6, there needs to be more attention paid to not only making a lot of good guns, but balancing them between all the different classes. I'd also like to see a return to universal weapons like the PDWs in Battlefield 4, allowing all the classes to be played with much more variety. But that about concludes my thoughts in regards to what lessons can be drawn from Battlefield 5. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'll be really interested to hear whether you agree, whether you disagree. But on that note, boys, if you did enjoy, please do subscribe to the channel. Have a great day. Thanks for watching and peace out, boys.